Rob here at etrailer.com, and today you're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster high-powered diode wiring kit on our 2015 Chevrolet Silverado 1500. Now keep in mind that's only one component of several that we're going to need for a full flat tow setup. The first one we're going to need is going to be our base plate. That's going to be the connection point on our car so we can safely tow it down the road. The next, we're going to need a tow bar. That's what's actually going to connect our base plate to the motorhome. We'll need safety cables, tow bar wiring, and finally a braking system. And one last final component I would recommend is the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect, because we are going to be required to disconnect the battery when we flat tow our Silverado, but the automatic battery disconnect is just going to be us pushing a button rather than having to open the hood, get our tools out, and disconnect the cables. Now the reason why you're going to want a diode kit for your Silverado is because you want to tow it behind your motorhome. And let's face it, when we go to the campgrounds, it's really nice to have a smaller vehicle to drive around if we want to go to dinner, just run an errand or anything like that. It's a lot easier to drive this than it is trying to drive our motorhome around. But since we're going to be taking our truck with us, we need a way to have signals at the back of our truck that match our motorhome. That way ourselves and everyone around us can be safe and know exactly what's going on. Whether we need to change lanes or if we're driving at night, we want to make sure our taillights are on. Well, our diodes are going to take the signal from our motorhome and transfer them into our factory taillights so we can be safe and all those signals are there, but it's also not going to change the outward appearance of our truck. Now there are a few different ways you can get those signals to the back of your truck. A tried and true way is those magnetic lights, but let's face it, that's an extra step we're going to have to do, set them up, and then we have the wire running from all the way back here up to the back of our motorhome, potentially dragging across the paint, eventually causing scratches. And then when we're done, we have to unwind them, find somewhere to store them. But with our diodes, it's going to be a one-time installation. Once they're in, we can forget that they're there. We just simply hook up to our motorhome and they'll work. And then when we unhook, our taillights will work completely normal, just like they're not there. Now one thing I really like about a diode is it is going to solve the problem of getting our lights back here, but it's also going to protect our electrical system on our Silverado. If we were to have a problem with our lights or anything else on our motorhome, it's not going to transfer into our truck because our diodes are going to stop that feed and not allow anything to cause any damage to our electrical system. Now as far as the installation goes, it is going to be extremely straightforward. We'll mount our plug on the front of our Silverado and we're going to run our 4-pole wire all the way to the back to our taillights. Now we're going to have to remove the taillights and we are going to have to tap into the electrical system. Now some customers may feel a little bit nervous about cutting their wires and tapping into their system, but we're here to walk you through all the steps so you can have the confidence to do it and not worry about it. In fact, we're going to show you how to test each function of the wire and make sure that you have everything hooked up right, so let's go ahead and do that now. To begin our installation, we want to start by running our wire from the front of our Silverado all the way to the back. Now obviously our bumper and the grille is removed, and that's just because we got done putting our base plate in, and that is going to be the easiest time to do your wiring. But if we follow my wire, I went over the skid plate here, started routing it underneath all of this, and once I got to about the front differential here, I actually took my wire and went over the frame rail. We can see it inside there. Just went right over the top so I could avoid the exhaust here. Came to the outside, ran it over my body mount here, and then I just started following the existing wiring and lines that are going across the back of the frame here all the way down until we got to about the other body mount towards the back of the bed here. Then I ran it in over top of my fuel tank, bringing it all the way back to the rear axle to where we can see it came back into the inside of the frame. I am using zip ties to secure it along the way. And then I have it drop down right by my spare tire or by back of the tailgate. Now we're going to move up top so we can get access to our taillights. Now if we open up our tailgate and we look on the inside ledge right here, we're going to have 2 screws that are holding our taillight in place. So you want to grab a T15 Torx bit and we'll pull both of those out. And once you have both those removed, we want to grab our taillight and pull straight back. You don't want to go too much side to side because there are some alignment pins and we don't want those to break. Once you have it loose, we're going to disconnect all 3 sockets out of our taillight. Just twist them counterclockwise. We should be able to pull them out. And we'll set our taillight assembly aside where it won't get damaged and remove the other side as well. At this point, we want to open up the wire loom here so we can get access to the individual wires inside. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my headlights on so we can check each wire and verify which one is going to control our taillight circuit. So here we can see our two taillights are coming on. I'm going to come through and I'm going to test each one of these wires to see which one is giving my 12-volt power source. So on the driver's side, our taillight circuit is going to be our brown wire. Now I'm going to turn my taillights off and I'm going to have an assistant stand on the brake pedal. That way I can isolate that signal. Now with our brake pedal applied, I'm going to double check the brown wire to make sure I'm not getting any power to it, which I'm not. And now I'll go through and check all the other wires to see which one is our brake signal. So it looks like it's going to be the dark green wire. There is two green wires. We want to use the darker colored one. And again, that's going to be the driver's side brake and turn signal. So we're going to repeat this entire process, checking our wires and verifying which function they go with on the other side as well. So now we want to grab our wire from underneath. I'm going to come as close as I can to the connector. I'm going to cut each one of these off because we're not going to be using this connector, but we need all four individual wires. Once we have it cut, fortunately we have a little bit of separation between the wires, because now what we want to do is we want to pull them apart as high up to the last anchor point that we can go, so we have four individual wires. And once you have them split all the way up to the last point you have up top, we're going to grab our white wire, our brown wire, and our yellow wire. And we're going to grab all three of these wires, and we should be able to reach up behind underneath the bumper here to where we can push them out the opening at the tail light. So just reach through, grab our wires, and we want to pull all the slack out to where it's coming out the top. Now I like to take my bundle of wire and I'm actually going to zip tie it to the existing wiring from the factory. That way I don't have to worry about all that slack coming back down, causing any problems later on down the road. So now we have our wires up top. We're going to start with our yellow wire, which our yellow wire is going to be our brake and our turn signal on the left side. So we want to grab the dark green wire that we tested earlier. Now you want to make sure at this point nobody has their foot on the brake, all the lights are off, and the key is out of the ignition. We'll come to our factory wire, and we're going to cut it directly in half, and then we're going to want to strip back both ends of it. We'll grab a diode that has all blue connectors on it, and it doesn't matter which two we grab, but we want to pull two of the terminals off. We're going to slide these over our stripped wires, and we'll crimp them in place. We can grab our yellow wire. I want to estimate about how much we're going to need to at least reach the other wire, and I always like to give myself a little bit of excess. So I'll go just a little bit past there, cut the excess off, and strip back the end of my yellow wire. Then I'll take the last spade terminal off of my diode and crimp it off. Now if we take a close look at our diode, we're going to have two terminals on the inside and one on the outside. Now the way that's going to work is one of our factory wire will get plugged in, and then our yellow wire is going to get plugged in, and then the one closest to the bulbs is going to be going out. So we'll take the one closest to the bulbs, plug into the out terminal, and then we'll plug in the other wires. Doesn't matter which side they go into, as long as they're both going into the in, and the one closest to the light is going to the out. So once everything's hooked up, it should look like this, having a green wire and a yellow wire coming out to our bulb. And we're going to do the same thing for our tail light wire, except it's going to be a little bit different once we go to put in our wire from underneath. So we'll just start by cutting our tail light wire from the factory. We'll strip back both ends. and we'll crimp on a blue spade terminal on each one of our wires. We want to make sure that we grab the diode that has a yellow terminal on it that's going to be on the inside. So for now, we'll take our diode, we'll plug one wire farthest from the bulbs into the in, and again the one closest to the bulbs on the out terminal. We'll do the same thing we did with our brown wire. We'll estimate about how much we need, give ourselves a little bit of extra, then we're going to cut the wire. Except this time we want to hold on to the excess wire and strip back the end of that, as well as the wire coming up from the bottom. And we're going to take both ends of our wires, combine them together, and we'll take our yellow spade terminal, slide it over both of them, and crimp it in place. Now, the yellow spade terminal is just there, it's just bigger, so we can fit both wires inside. We're going to plug it into the other in terminal on our taillight diode. Now we're going to take our brown excess wire that we had now, we're going to send it down through the same opening that we brought our wires up. We're going to beat up our green wire, and our green wire is going to hook up on the passenger side for the brake signal, and the brown wire will hook up over on the passenger side for our taillight signal. Now our white wire is going to be our ground wire. So I actually just ran it inside to the inside of this pocket here. I'm going to trim off the excess. I'll strip back the end of my wire. And if we look in our kit, we'll find a small ring terminal. I'm going to crimp this onto the end of our ground wire. And then we can either attach this to an existing screw, or we can use the self-tapping screw from our kit and secure it to some flat sheet metal. Now right here is a nice spot because there's nothing behind it, so we're not going to be interfering with anything, and it'll be out of the way of the taillight itself. So I'll use a 1/4 inch nut driver to put my self-tapping screw in place. Now you want to make sure that that ring terminal isn't spinning around, so you want to tighten it up enough, but you don't want to tighten it so much that it strips it out. Now on the passenger side, we used the same method to just reach our wire up to the top, and we hooked them up because fortunately over the passenger side we had the exact same color wires for the same function. So brown will go to brown and green will go to green. Now on the back of our diodes we're going to have this double-sided foam tape. So I'm just going to remove the backing off of each one, and to save myself some space, I'm just going to stick them together. And then we can work on putting our taillights back into place. Now once we have our taillights back in place, we can move back up to the front and we can reinstall the bumper and our grille and everything else. However, we have a few more components that we're going to be installing on our Silverado, so we're going to do that now. We're going to be mounting our wiring right next to our base plate. I actually just took a hole saw, and we're going to be adding a 6-pole round instead of our 4-pole connector because we have a few more wires that we're going to be adding. So I just took my connector, used it as a template, made sure I had plenty of room to mount it here and behind here, and then I just used a hole saw to cut out the center and marked out the 2 mounting locations. But we can take our 4-pole wire, and just to make sure we have enough, I'm going to cut as close as I can to the connector. And then for our additional wire, I'm going to go ahead and cut it to the same length so I don't have to worry about all that excess slack in the back. Now we want to go ahead and strip back each one of our wires that's going to be going into the connector. Now we're going to grab our connector and pull off the boot on the back, exposing the terminals. And we'll take our wires, we'll slide them into the small end of our boot to where they're going to come out the front. Then we'll just slide the boot out of the way. Don't have to worry about it interfering with our wires. Now if we look at the back of our plug, we're going to have a bunch of labels going around. Now they are really small, kind of hard to read, but if we start on top, the top one should be labeled TM, that's going to be for trailer marker, and if we go counterclockwise, the large one next to it is be GD for ground, then LT for left turn, RT for right turn, and this one on the side is going to be for your electric brakes, and then the one in the middle is going to be your 12-volt power source. So if we go around color for color, the top one is going to be brown, The large one for ground is going to be white, our left turn will be yellow, our right turn will be green, and then for our application we're going to be putting our red wire into the 12-volt power source because that's going to be hooked up to our charge line so we can make sure our battery stays charged. So you just want to grab a really small Phillips blade screwdriver. We'll open up the terminals. Now you don't want to remove the screw because these are super small and easy to lose. We'll just loosen it up so we have enough room so we can take our wire. And we'll put the copper wire into the terminal and we can tighten down that set screw. Now I like to leave just a very, very small bit of copper wire sticking out of the terminal. That way I know it's getting a good connection and I don't have to worry about the insulation interfering with it. But I'm going to leave just a really small amount sticking out the top. That way I don't have to worry about it crossing over and causing any kind of shortage or any kind of arcing onto another circuit. So we're going to go through and just continue hooking up all of our wires until they're all in there. So this is what your connector should look like. Even if you don't have a 12-volt power source, it should be in this order going around the socket. Now what I like to do once I have all my connections made is I like to put a good amount of dielectric grease on all these connectors back here, and that'll just help prevent any kind of corrosion from building up and keep moisture from getting inside the connectors. Just put a little bit of dielectric grease in there, slide our boot over the back of our plug again. Now to help keep it in place and protect the wires, I'm going to wrap the entire back of the plug with some electrical tape and go up as high as I can to help keep all that moisture, debris, and dirt out of the back of the connector. So I'm just going to push my plug into the hole that I drilled. I'm going to take some bolts and nuts and go through and secure everything down. Now since it's behind the bumper, we should be able to reach up, find the plug, and put the nut on the back side. Now it may be a little bit difficult, but you can always get an extra set of hands to help you if you need it. Let's make sure our bolts are nice and tight. And then we can go and test our wiring and make sure everything's working properly. I went ahead and plugged up my Silverado to a tester to simulate my motorhome. So if I go ahead and turn on the taillight function, we can see that those are working on my truck, as well as the left turn signal, my brake lights, and finally the right turn signal. But now that we know that our wiring is working with our motorhome, we're going to continue hooking up our flat tow setup so we can start our adventure.